So during Lent, the sermon series is on the I am sayings, and there are 6 sayings in John's gospel, and I promise you there won't be a test, but I'm hopeful that by the end of the series you'll at least have them memorize them. I am the bread of life, the light of the world, the good shepherd, the vine, the way, the truth, and the life, and I am the resurrection. So we're also going to be exploring those same I am sayings in the small groups, which begin again this week, and it's not too late to sign up. I encourage you to join a group, to be part of a small group experience. Helps you learn, helps you build friendships, and helps us to be able to share life together. So if you're on the fence about joining a group, just give it a try. Just give it a try. So we started the series with the great I am, and you might remember that was God's answer to Moses when he said, "What should I tell the Israelites when they ask me your name?" And God says to them, what? I am who I am. And last week we heard about the bread of life. Those who come to me, Jesus said, will not hunger, and they who believe in me will not thirst. And this morning we hear Jesus says, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Now, when Jesus makes this statement, we know that it's the time of the Festival of Booths, or you might know it as the Festival of the Tabernacle. In its Hebrew name is Sukkot. And it was the last of the fall festivals held at the end of the agricultural cycle when the grapes and the olives were harvested in Israel. It was the time, the celebration to thank God for all the preceding year's provision and then to pray for a good rainy season. So, it's festival time, a celebration, and the great Rabbi Jesus is in the temple teaching those with ears what discipleship means. Now, as we read on in the chapter, the Pharisees have a little conflict with what Jesus is saying. So they kind of do their verbal exchange, their little dance, and what results occurs the increase in tension. Now, if you want to, just read the entire chapter of 8th chapter, and it'll give you a better or fuller picture of the content, but that's really, and it puts it in a nutshell. It's a harvest, it's a festival, a celebration, and he's in there teaching about discipleship. And he says, I am the light of the world. Now, what I need to tell you is that I really needed to hear these words this week. I needed to hold tight to Jesus' declaration that there is light in the darkness. I needed the reassurance that Jesus is the light of the world. And when I follow Christ, I need not fear the darkness. I needed to hear that because it's been a very demanding and draining week. Darkness settled in at the torment of a family's grief, at the suicide of a beloved grandson and son and brother and dear friend. So for me to hear these words and now say them out loud to you, that Jesus is the light of the world, and as you follow Jesus, you will not walk in darkness, but you will have the light of life. I put those words in my head because it gives to me, it gives to all of us whose souls are burdened, a simple way to see beyond it, a way to help us walk through the valley of the shadows when there is no light. So there may be darkness surrounding you today. You might have heard some bad news about a health issue. You might be dealing with the death of someone you love. You might have made some not so healthy choices. You might have embarrassed yourself. You might have stumbled off your mission. You may be resentful and bitter because of unmet expectations. You might be relentless in your drive to get more done, do more things, be busy to achieve. And your journey might be filled with the search for independence or intimacy, which closes out the support of both family, friends, and your faith community. As dark times occur, we become exhausted with fear. And here's the good news. Light shines in whatever darkness we may find ourselves, or on whatever misdirected path we find. The light of Christ shines in whatever situations we're dealing with. John also says the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. Jesus is the light of the world, and the light of Christ is always present. It cannot be extinguished or diminished. That's good news for today. There's a story about a little boy spending his Saturday morning out in the sandbox. You remember sandboxes? That's how old the story is. And he has this box of his little cars and trucks, and he has his shovel and his pail, and he's digging through that old sandbox, making rows for his cars and piles for his truck, and he's creating this pathway around the sandbox. And as he was digging, he hit a big rock. Now, the little guy was smart enough to know if he dug around that big rock, he could move it and get it out and continue on playing in the sandbox. And he did just that, and he figured out how to get it, and he pushed and he nudged and he pushed and he nudged, and he got that big old rock to the edge of the sandbox, and then with everything he had, he shoved it up, and it got to the very top of the boundary, and it fell down. He was a persistent little booger. He kept doing it over and over and over again. Every single time it got to the top, fell down. And finally, that little boy, he pushed and he pushed and he grunted and he persisted, and the rock fell and rolled on his fingers and smashed them. And he began to cry. Now, all this time, Mom's in the kitchen watching. And as he's weeping, tears filled, there was a shadow that fell across him, and the mother stood there with him, and she said to him, "Why didn't you use all the strength available to you?" And that defeated little boy looked back at his mom and said, "I did. I used everything I had. I used all my strength." And she says to him, "No, you did not." Much nicer than I did. She said, "No, you did not use your strength because you didn't ask me for help." Jesus is the light of the world. And whoever follows Jesus will never walk in darkness and will have the light of life. And that is it. There's the good news. We don't have to walk in the darkness. We don't have to be afraid. We can choose the light, and that will give us light for our living. Rabbi Kushner writes, "God is the light shining in the midst of darkness, not to deny that there is darkness in the world, but to reassure us that we do not have to be afraid of the darkness because it will always yield to the light. And light is what Christ brings into our world. Light illuminates darkness, and as we walk with Christ, as we live more Christ-like, we also shine light in darkness. We shine light in feeding those who are hungry and providing resources so families do not have to be homeless, responding to natural and human-caused disasters. As we live Christ-like, we shine light because we notice each other. And when we notice each other, we can greet each other. Greet each other not as stranger, but as friend. And as we walk with Christ, we radiate compassion because we're allowed to be authentic in our conversations and in our building up of friendship. And one other thing, when we walk in that Christ, we diminish the fear. And we know what fear does. We don't have to participate in fearful attitudes or fearful behaviors because as we walk with Christ, we live by faith, not fear. We are people of the light, those who follow Christ. So, during Lent, we usually give up something. We give up something in order to help us remember the journey through Lent. And so we're doing just the opposite. We're inviting you to add something, right? We're going to add something to the Lent. What was the first thing we asked you to add? You got it. Names. Her name is Annette. Second thing, last week, I am the bread of life. We ask you to add what? A taste. Do not try hot Thai. Okay? Just telling you. But if you did not add a taste, guess what is happening immediately after the service? The chili cook-off. And I'm sure there are plenty of tastes you have never had before. Now, today, we're going to ask you to try something new. Like join a bird watching class. Or join the choir. Well, not all of you, because I actually have heard some of you saying, don't go to bird watching class. Go home by a different route. Go to the restaurant you pass by every single time and say, why don't we stop there? Maybe, just maybe try a small group. So that's the challenge today. Just try something new. I read a while back, photographers captured a picture of the great Michael Jordan dunking at his basketball camp. It was about 2 years ago. And then the year after, or last year that would be, the little guys and girls who were at the camp watched the basketball legend Larry Bird make 15 three-point shots in a row. And then after that, the great Julius Erving, the famous Dr. J, dunked the ball at 63 years old. They're still in the game. And so are you. In Christ, you have the light of life, no matter what your age. For we are people who abide in Christ. We're the people who shine the light of Christ because we know what it means to be connected and loved. We know what it means to be part of a community that's kind and safe. We know what it means to be a people who affirm each other and a community that values and practice inclusiveness. We know what it is to shine light because we are people of light. We follow Christ, who is the light of the world. And that is the good news for today and tomorrow and for always.